Yuna Lee, a cruising yawl, swung to her anchor without a flutter of the sail and was at rest. The flood had made, the wind was nearly calm, and being bound down the river, the only thing for it was to come to and wait for the turn of the tide. The sea reach of the Thames stretched before us like the beginning of an interminable waterway. The air was dark above Gravesend, and further back still seemed to condense into a mournful gloom, brooding motionless over the biggest and greatest town on earth.
The director of companies was our captain and our host. Before affectionately washed his back as he stood in the bows looking into the seaward. Between there was, as I have already said somewhere, the bond of the sea, the lawyer, the accountant, Marlowe, the director. We exchanged a few words lazily.
And at last, in its curved and imperceptible fall, the sun sank low, and from glowing white changed to a dull red without rays and without heat, as if about to go out suddenly, stricken to death by the touch of that gloom brooding over a crowd of men. Forthwith, a change came over the waters, and the serenity became less brilliant but more profound. What greatness had not floated on the ebb of that river into the mystery of an unknown earth? The dreams of men, the seed of commonwealth, the germs of empires. Further west, on the upper reaches of the place of the monstrous town, was still marked ominously on the sky a brooding gloom in the sunshine, a lurid glare under the stars.
And this also has been one of the dark places of the earth.
He was the only man of us who still followed the sea. He was a seaman, but he was a wanderer too. While most seamen led, if one may so express it, a sedentary life. His home is always with them, a ship, and so is their country, the sea. Marlowe was not typical, and to him, the meaning of an episode was not inside like a kernel but outside, enveloping the tale which brought it out only as a glow brings out a haze, in the likeness of one of these misty halos that sometimes are made visible by the spectral illumination of moonshine.
I was thinking of very old times, when the Romans first came here, 1900 years ago. It was a great savage wilderness to them, precious little to eat fit for a civilized man, nothing but Thames water to drink. Imagine what it must have been like for a young Roman captain or soldier to come to a place so far from home and lacking in comforts. I suppose you fellows remember I did once turn freshwater sailor for a bit. I had then, as you remember, just returned to London after a lot of Indian Ocean, Pacific, China seas, a refuller those of the East. 6 years or so, and I was loafing about, hindering you fellows in your work and invading your homes, just as though I had got a heavenly mission to civilize you. Now when I was a little chap I had a passion for maps. I would look for hours at South America, or Africa, or Australia, and lose myself in all the glories of exploration. At that time, there were many blank spaces on the earth, and when I saw one that looked particularly inviting on a map, I would put my finger on it and say, when I grow up, I will go there, the biggest, the most blank, so to speak, that I had a hankering after. True, by this time, it was not a blank space anymore. It had got filled since my boyhood with rivers and lakes and names. It had ceased to be a blank space of delightful mystery, a white patch for a boy to dream gloriously over. It had become a place of darkness, but there was in it one river especially, a mighty big river. Then I remembered there was a big concern, a company for trade on that river. Dash it all! I thought to myself, they can't trade without using some kind of craft on that lot of fresh water. Steamboats. Why shouldn't I try to get charge of one? I had an aunt, a dear enthusiastic soul.
It will be delightful. I am ready to do anything for you. It is a glorious idea. I know the wife of a very high personage in the administration and also a man who has.
She was determined to make no end of fuss to get me appointed skipper of a river steamboat, if such was my fancy. I got my appointment, of course, and I got it very quick. It appears the company had received the news that one of their captains had been killed in a scuffle with the natives. With the help of my aunt, I finally got a dream job. After I heard the news, I flew to the company headquarters madly. It took 48 hours to cross the channel to show myself to my employers and sign the contract. However, when I first arrived at the city, it reminded me of a whited sepulchre. Prejudice, no doubt. I had no difficulty in finding the company's offices. It was the biggest thing in the town, the greatest overseas empire, established only by trade. A narrow and deserted street in deep shadow, high houses, ungarnished staircase, all conjured me of dry desert, a dead silence. When I opened the first door I came to, there were two women waiting for me, one fat and the other slim, sitting on straw-bottomed chairs, knitting black wool. I followed the woman and sat in the waiting room. There were various colorful doors, red, blue, little green. However, I wasn't going into any of these. I was going to the yellow, dead in the center, and the river was there, fascinating, deadly, like a snake. Finally, a door opened. A white-haired secretarial head, but wearing a compassionate expression, appeared and beckoned me into the sanctuary. He was 5'6", I should judge. He shook hands, murmured vaguely,
Bon voyage.
and then, in about 45 seconds, I found myself again in the waiting room with the compassionate secretary who, full of desolation and sympathy, made me sign some official document. From that point, I began to feel uneasy, you know. I sensed something ominous in the atmosphere, the feeling that I had been led into some conspiracy. I don't know, something not quite right. So I was glad when I finally got out of the room. However, before I depart, one clerk came to me and said,
You have to visit the doctor. It's just a simple formality.
and I followed. The old doctor was waiting for me. He felt my pulse, evidently thinking of something else for a while, and he mumbled some words.
Good for there. Would you let me measure the head?
Yes. He produced a thing like calipers and got the dimensions back and forth in every way, taking notes carefully. He was an unshaven little man in the threadbare coat like a carpentine, with his feet in slippers, and I thought him a harmless fool.
I always ask leave in the interest of science to measure the crania of those going out there.
And when they come back too?
Oh, I never see them, and moreover the changes take place inside you. So you are going out there, famous, interesting too. Ever any madness in your family?
Is that in the interest of science too?
It would be. Interesting for science to watch the mental changes of individuals on the spot, but you are the first Englishman coming under my observation, so...
Then sorry, sir. I am not the least typical Englishman. If I were, I wouldn't be talking like this with you. What I say will probably be erroneous.
Avoid irritation more than exposure to the sun. Adieu. How do you English say, eh? Ah, goodbye. In the tropics, one must before everything keep calm.
After seeing the doctor, I still had one important thing to do, saying goodbye to my excellent aunt. The whole voyage wouldn't be possible without her, so I met her before I left the country and we had a cup of tea together.
Charlie, I'm so glad you're leaving such a great journey. You're weaning those ignorant millions from their horrid ways. You're saving their lives. I'm so proud of you, my dear.
And then I headed to the French steamboat, which will take me to Africa. Before boarding the French steamer, I had a brief but strange feeling about this journey. The feeling of I am setting up for the center of the earth. We pounded along, stopped, landed soldiers, went on, landed custom house clerks, and went on. Every day the coast looked the same, as though we had not moved, but we passed various trading places. Though the trip was idle, one moment that made me feel that I was in reality was when I met the black fellows. They shouted, sang, and their bodies streamed with perspiration, but they had bone, muscle, a wide vitality, an intense energy of movement. They were a great comfort to look at. It ended suddenly with the firing sound. French men of war shelling an apparently uninhabited forested stretch of coast. Perhaps some natives were there, he said, but I could feel there was a touch of insanity. Nowhere did we stop long enough to get a particularized impression, but the general sense of vague and oppressive wonder grew upon me. It was like a weary pilgrimage of nightmares. The boat finally arrived at the mouth of the Congo River, and I had to board another steamship bound for a point 30 miles upriver. The captain of the ship was a young Swede, knowing me for a seaman. He invited me on the bridge.
Been living there?
Yeah?
Fine, lot these government chaps, are they not? It is funny what some people will do for a few francs a month. I wonder what colonial businesses become when it goes really into the colonial lands.
I expected to see that soon.
Really? Then be careful. The other day I took up a man who hanged himself on the road. He was a Swede too.
Hanged himself? Why?
Who knows? The sun is too much for him. Or the country, perhaps.
Finally, I arrived at the Congo River. A rocky cliff being blasted for no apparent purpose, waste of excavations, and a group of black prisoners walking along in chains under the guard of another black man who carries a rifle. Together, created a terrible sight.
There's your company's station, farewell.
I came upon more pieces of decaying machinery, a stack of rusty rails. To the left of clump of trees made a shady spot. 6 black men advanced in a file, toiling up the path. I could see every rib. The joints of their limbs were like knots in a rope. Each had an iron collar on his neck. And all were connected together with a chain which were making rhythmically clinking sounds on each step they made. My purpose was to stroll into the shade for a moment, but no sooner than it seemed to me I had stepped into the gloomy circle of some inferno. There were numerous mines on the cliff, and there were native workers dying slowly in labor exploitation. They were not enemies, they were not criminals, but it was evident that they were under the shadow of disease and starvation. And there was a man, one of the native workers, who seemed young, almost a boy, near my hand. He looked so thin that it was no wonder for him to die soon. I found nothing else to do but to offer him one of my good sweet chips biscuits I had in my pocket. He seemed to wonder at the meaning of white stranger giving a thing which he never seen before to him. I made haste towards the station. When near the buildings, I met a white man in such an unexpected elegance.
Hi, nice to meet you. I am the company's chief accountant.
He told me that all the bookkeeping was done at the station. Besides, it was surprising that with great demoralization of the land, he kept up his appearance like a hairdresser's dummy.
I've been teaching one of the native women about the station. It was difficult. She had a distaste for the work.
I had to wait in the station for 10 days, an eternity. I stayed at the station. One day, the accountant said,
In the interior, you will no doubt meet Mr. Kurtz. He was a first-class agent who was in charge of a trading post, a very important one in the true ivory country at the very bottom of there. When you see Mr. Kurtz, tell him that everything here is very satisfactory. I am afraid to send a written message for fear it will be intercepted by undesirable elements at the central station.
Next day, I left the station at last. The paths to the central station were filled with solitude, nobody, not a hut. The population had cleared out a long time ago. The endless paths made me feel like I'm going mad. My white companion got ill, which made the journey even harder. I met the manager when I arrived at the central station. However, unfortunately, I found that the steamer he was to command had sunk. The manager told me that the general manager of the central station had taken the boat out 2 days before under the charge of a volunteer skipper, and they had torn the bottom out on some rocks. The repair seemed to take months.
There were rumors that a very important station was in jeopardy, and its chief, Mr. Kurtz, was ill. Hope it was not true. Mr. Kurtz was...
I had heard of Mr. Kurtz on the coast.
Ah, so they talk of him down there. Mr. Kurtz was the best agent he had, an exceptional man of the greatest importance to the company.
Though praising Mr. Kurtz, I have felt his anxiety.
By the way, your boat, how long it would take to...
How can I tell? I haven't even seen the wreck yet. Some months, no doubt. The conversation was futile. How can this man be the agent? Maybe being healthy in such a harsh place is a great strength, I thought. But after all, he was a chattering idiot. Oh, these months. Well, never mind. Various things happened. One evening, a grass shad full of calico, cotton prints, beads, and I don't know what else burst into a blaze so suddenly. And more surprisingly, there were native laborers dancing delightedly as it burned. After the dust settled, a nigger was being beaten nearby. They said he had caused the fire in some way. He was screeching most horribly. As I approached the glow from the dark, I found myself at the back of two men, talking.
Kurtz took advantage of his unfortunate accident.
Did you ever see anything like it, eh? It's incredible.
One man was the manager. The other man seemed like an aristocrat, and was told as a brickmaker. But there wasn't a fragment of a brick anywhere in the station, and he had been there more than a year, waiting. There was an air of plotting about that station, but nothing came of it, of course. I had a small conversation with the brickmaker, whom I told less to. The brickmaker tried to get information about the intentions of the company's board of directors in Europe, about which, of course, I knew nothing. The conversation became boring. When I rose, I noticed an unusual painting on the wall of a blindfolded woman with a lighted torch. What is this?
It is Kurtz's work.
Tell me, pray, who is this Mr. Kurtz?
He is a prodigy sent as a special emissary of the Western ideal by the company's directors and bound for quick advancement. Today, he is chief of the best station. Next year, he will be assistant manager. 2 years more, and you are of the new gang, the Gang of Virtue. The same people who sent him specially also recommended you.
No, I'm just...
Oh, don't say no. I have my own eyes to trust.
I realized the brickmaker had planned on being assistant manager, and Kurtz's arrival has upset his chances. He believed I was allied with Kurtz. Instead of correcting his misunderstanding, I let the man believe I really do have influence in Europe and told him to bring a quantity of rivets from the coast to repair the ship. It was such a great comfort to have an influential friend like him. Things were going well. My foreman was sitting on the desk of the ship. I slapped him lightly and told him that we will have rivets in 3 weeks. The rivets do not come, however, instead.
Some people call it the El Dorado Exploration Expedition. A group of white men intent on tearing treasure out of the bowels of the land arrived. It is led by the manager's uncle.
From that moment, I gave up on receiving rivets. I started to wonder disinterestedly about Kurtz and his agents.